Welcome to part 11 of this Python course, which covers file access, both writing data to a file and reading data back from a file. Data in comma-separated value format is also covered. Today's class is all about two things. Firstly, being able to store data to a file on a disk. And secondly, allowing us to access or read the data back, which is contained inside a specific text file. There are two types of text file formats that we are going to have a look at today. Firstly, we're going to deal with plain text files. The second file is also a text file, but it's a specific file in terms of the format of data. And this file is known as a comma-separated variable file. The abbreviation or the extension for that file is CSV, which stands for comma-separated variable. It is a specific text file format in which every data point in that file is separated using a comma. When it comes to file access, there are steps that we need to follow to be able to access any of these files. Step one, the first thing we need to do is to open the file. When we open a file, we have various options available. The first option is allowing us to open it in read mode. And read mode gets an R or an R+. I'll explain that just now. The second option will be write mode, which is a W or a W+. And finally, the third option is append mode, which gets an A or an A+. Once the file has been opened in one of those options, we can then go on to access the file. And by accessing, I mean accessing the data contained in the file. Finally, once we are finished accessing the file, we need to close the file. Now, these three modes that I spoke about, read, write, and append, basically, read mode is quite straightforward. If you want to save data or write data to a file and then read it back again, you will use read mode. So read mode allows you to open the file and read the contents of that file. Write and append do something very similar. They both will allow you to save data to a file. But this is the difference. In write mode, the file is opened and data is written at the start of the file. What this means is that if your file already contains data, you will then overwrite the data that is in that file. In append mode, you also write data to the file, but the file pointer moves to the end of the file. So if there is any data already in that file, you will simply be adding on more data to the data contained in the file already. I'm going to start by having a look at the write mode so that we can actually save some data and we can then call it back. Whenever we're working with a file and reading and writing data, we need to create a file name. So basically, we need to create a path to a file. So when I create file name, I need to specify the drive, the path, and the file name that you want to write to. In my case, I'm going to choose E drive, the temp folder, and a file called data.txt. If you do not specify the drive or the folder, then Python will write to the default folder that you're currently working in. Once you've created the file name, we are then going to create a file handler. A file handler is basically a container pointing to what we want to work in. And I'm going to create a file handler simply called fn. We'll see how to do this now. We type fn equals, and then we specify open. We are going to open that file there. So we specify that file name, and then I'm going to open it in write mode. Once we've opened the file, we can now access that file. And all I'm going to do here is to write some data to the file. And to do that, we type fn.write, and then inside parentheses, we can place a string. So I'm going to type Python, whoops, is awesome. Finally, we need to close the file, otherwise we will not be able to open it again using any other program. And to close the file, we simply type fn.close. So we use the close method to close that file. If I run this code, so if I go and open my Windows Explorer and I go to my E drive, which is where I keep my temporary data, and there is the folder in the E drive called temp. If I open that up, you will see that there is a file in there called data.txt. That is exactly what I asked it to create. E drive temp folder data.txt. So that file is there. And if I open that file, there it is. All it contains is some text which says Python is awesome. Right, so there is my little text file. Now, let's add some data to that file. I'm going to open the file in append mode. So once the file has been opened in append mode, we can then use the same string we used here, fn.write, and in parentheses, we can specify some more. So I'm going to put a new line in there, and I'm going to say, especially for engineers and scientists. And then finally, we close the file again by using fn.close. And if I run these 3 lines of code, what we end up with is the data file in there. But if I open that data file now, you can see that there are now 2 lines inside it. The first line is what we originally saved, Python is awesome. And the second line is the line we've now added to our text file, which says especially for engineers and scientists. So what I've done here, I've opened the file name in append mode. I've then set up a little loop structure, which is going to be running through all values of I from 0 to 9. And then it's going to square that value, convert it to a string, and write that string to the file. Finally, it's going to close that file. We're in append mode, so it's hopefully added this data to the existing file. So if I open up the file again, we can see that there is the data that has been added, 0, 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, and 81. So those are the squares that we have written. Now you'll see that the format is very difficult to read. It's just a string of numbers. And that is because we haven't specified how to write it. So strictly speaking, when you are writing data, Python is going to write the data exactly like you state. If you want a new line, you need to specify it like I've done there. Move to a new line using the \n. Okay, now that we have got a text file, I'm going to have a look at reading that text file. And to do this, I'm going to use the read method. Now, there are 2 options to read a file. The first method is simply read, and the second method is called read line, and I'll demonstrate the difference between both of them. So if I now come in and I'll say file name equals, I'm going to just create the same file. So I'm using exactly the same file that we created previously up here, because I'm now going to read data from that file. N equals open file name, and this time we're going to open it in read mode. Once the file has been opened in read mode, we can then read the text in the file into a variable. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it str text equals fn.read, and then finally fn.close. So if I run that code, that file is hopefully now read. And to check whether it has been, I'm going to say print str text. And if I do that, it comes back and prints out exactly what is contained in my data file. There it is. Python is awesome, especially for engineers and scientists. And there is my numeric string. If we do the same thing, so you can see that instead of using the read method, I'm using the read line method. So let's see the difference. Once I've done that, I'm going to say fn.close, and just to make sure that everything was done, I'm going to print it out. I'm going to say print str line 1. So if I run it, it comes back and says Python is awesome. As you can see, this read line method has read the first line inside that text file. If I add another line of code in here, I'll say str line 2 equals fn.readLine. I'm now going to say print str line 1, print str line 2, and if I run it now, you can see it reads two separate lines. Python is awesome is inside the variable we created called str line 1, and the text, especially for engineers and scientists, and the numeric string will be in str line 2. Reading data from a text file line by line, like we've done, is quite a tedious option. So it's usually best to read the complete file into a tuple or a list. Well, that will allow us to then separate the various parts out. Let's do it again. If I say fn equals open, we're going to open the file name in read mode. This time I'm going to say I'm going to create a variable called tdata equals of fn. Remember, fn is the file in read mode, and that line of code will allow us to read the complete file and put it inside a tuple. And we can then close the file fn.close. And if I print out tdata, we can see that tdata contains all the data from that file inside a tuple. So we know it's a tuple. We've got parentheses, and the first string in that tuple is that one there. Python is awesome. The second string is especially for engineers and scientists with the numeric data. All right, if we wanted to print it out exactly like we wrote it, we can simply say print data and use indexing. So tData0 will be the first string, and we can then tell it to print out tData second string, and that will then print out exactly what we had in the original file. Okay, for this next part, we are going to be looking at a comma-separated value file, or a CSV file. Sometimes it's called comma-separated values, sometimes it's called comma-separated variables. So let's start by looking at the structure of a CSV file. So to do this, what I'm going to do is to create a CSV file, and then I'm going to show you what that file actually looks like in terms of data. And to create this file, I'm going to create a CSV file containing numeric data, which is basically just random data. So I'm going to start off by importing the random module. So I'm going to say import random, and then I'm going to create a file name. The file name is going to be, again, on my E drive in my temp folder, and I'm going to call this data.csv. You'll notice now I haven't called it using the extension txt, because I'm not creating a simple text file, I'm creating a comma-separated variable file. Once that file name has been chosen, I can use the file handler fn equals open that file name in write mode, and then finally I'm going to start writing some data. So fn.write, and I'm going to start off by naming the columns. So I'm going to start off with X, comma Y, comma Z, and then a new line. Now I'm going to create a loop structure for W in range. Let's go from 1 to 31. I'm going to create 30 values inside this file, and then I'm going to write some data. X equals random.random, Y equals random.random, and Z equals random.random. Okay, so all we're doing is creating random data. Once we've got X, Y, and Z, I'm now going to create the CSV string, which we are then going to write to the file. So str CSV is going to equal W. We're going to convert W to a string. And then we're going to add a comma to it. Then we're going to add, append, X. And again, we need to add a comma to that data. We're then going to add str Y, add another comma, and lastly str Z. And finally, we're going to end off by adding a new line. So that is the string that I have created. Now this string is the CSV. Oops, should be a comment. This is the CSV string that I want to write. And once we've done that, we can write that. So fn.write str CSV. Finally, when the data has all been written, we can say fn.close, and that will then close the file. So just let me say print CSV data written, just to give me a message. All right, so if I run that code, it comes back and says, right, the CSV data has been written. if I now go to my E drive into the temp folder, there is the file we've created, data.csv. And you'll notice one thing straight away, that it doesn't look like a normal text file. It's got the little Excel symbol next to it. So if I tell it to open up in a text editor, let's just see what it looks like first. There is the data we have just written. You can see that at the top we've got comma, X, comma, Y, comma, Z, and then in each line we've got the index number, which is 1, comma, a random number, comma, another random number, comma, a third random number. So each line consists of these 4 numbers, an index number, and then the 3 random numbers that were generated. Right, if I go back and see, there it is there. We've got the index number, which is W, and then we've got the 3 random numbers, which is X, Y, and Z. Now, if I open this file in Excel, let's have a look what happens. There you can see what the data looks like, all neatly ordered in cells. So this is the file we've created. At the top, you can see titles of each of those columns or the headings. We've got nothing, and then an X, a Y, and a Z. The first column contains the index numbers. The second column contains all the X data. The third column is the Y data, and the fourth column is the Z data. Right, now that we have seen what the structure of a CSV file looks like, I'm going to switch over to Pandas module, and I'm going to look at the Pandas data frame. Right, so to do this, I'm going to have a look at another example showing you how we can create data in Pandas and how we can then display that data. So I'm going to start off by importing Pandas, and I'm going to rename it to PD, and I'm also going to import random. So all I'm doing is I'm importing the Pandas module, which allows us to work very easily with CSV data. I'm going to create a variable called df, which is short for data frame. You can call it anything you like. df equals pd dot data frame. Then in parentheses, I'm going to specify a dictionary structure. So I'm going to say column A, and then in column A, I'm going to generate some random data. Random.random in range. See, how many values should we put in there? Let's say 20. Okay, so that is going to contain or create our first column. We can then easily add another column of data to the data frame. And to do that, I'm going to create another column called B. So I'm going to say df B equals, and that is going to be another list. I'm going to say random dot, let's create a different range of values. So I'm going to use the uniform and create random numbers between 1 and 10 this time. For X range, and again I'm going to create 20 values. Right, so there it is. All I'm doing is I'm creating a data frame containing 2 columns of data. The first column is going to have the title A, and the second column will have the title B, and both of them will contain random data. The first column will contain random data between 0 and 1, and there'll be 20 values. The second column, B, will contain random data between 1 and 10, and there will be again 20 values. So if I run that, that data frame has hopefully now been created. And we can check by viewing the data frame. And to view the data frame, simply use the print statement. I'm going to say print df, which is the name of our data frame. So if I run that code, print df, there is our data frame structure. And thank you for watching, and please subscribe for more content.